Rain poured over the city as a bruised old man walked into the bank with a torn sack. Guards laughed, until the sack split open, spilling contracts signed by the bank's founder. Cameras turned. The man everyone mocked wasn't a beggar. He was the true owner, back from the shadows to expose the empire built on his stolen name. Tonight, power would finally kneel before truth.
If this moment felt intense, prepare yourself, because what comes next is darker, more dangerous, and far more powerful than anything you've seen so far. Subscribe to Black Battles and hit the bell icon so you never miss our latest powerful stories.
The morning sun glimmered on the glass doors of Collins National Bank, reflecting the rhythm of downtown Atlanta, hurried footsteps, car horns, and the steady hum of ambition. Inside, the air was cool and scented with polished marble. Tellers smiled with trained precision. Screens flickered with transactions, and the soft clink of coins merged with polite conversation. At exactly 10:17 a.m., the calm was interrupted. A man in a frayed brown coat and worn-out shoes stepped through the entrance, clutching an old burlap sack. His hair was streaked with gray, and his face carried the deep lines of a hard-lived life. He looked out of place, too rough for the suits, too calm for the desperate. The security guard by the door gave him a wary look. "Sir, can I help you?" The man didn't answer right away. He glanced around the lobby, eyes resting briefly on every corner. The logo on the wall, the teller counters, the plaque that read, "Founded by Thomas Collins, 1987. Then, he smiled faintly. "Yes," he said. "You can help me find what's mine." The guard frowned. "Excuse me." The man took a slow breath, straightened his back, and said in a voice that carried across the lobby, "This bank belongs to me." Every head turned. A wave of laughter rippled through the customers. One man snorted. A woman whispered, "Is he drunk?" The tellers exchanged awkward glances, unsure whether to call security or the police. Behind the counter, Mariah Evans, a young teller, froze. Something about the man's tone, not the words but the weight behind them, made her hesitate. Before she could say anything, the branch manager, Richard Collins, emerged from his office. Tall, well-dressed, and every bit his father's son, he approached with practiced arrogance. "Sir," Richard began, his voice dripping with disdain, "if you're here for assistance, you must step aside. We're busy with real customers." The stranger looked him straight in the eye. "I'm the only real customer this place ever had." Richard chuckled, signaling to the guards. "All right, that's enough. Please escort this gentleman outside." The guard stepped forward, gripping the man's arms. He didn't resist. He just looked around the room, at the walls, the vault door, the people still laughing, and said quietly, "One day, you'll all know who built this place." As they pushed him toward the exit, his old sack slipped from his shoulder and fell to the floor. Papers scattered everywhere, yellowed pages, sealed envelopes, and leather-bound documents. The laughter stopped. Mariah, still behind the counter, caught sight of something unusual among the papers. A deed stamped with a date older than the bank itself. Curious, she walked over as the guards forced the man outside. "Wait," she said, kneeling to pick up the papers. She scanned one quickly. Property transfer, 1986. Another document bore signatures. One of them was unmistakable, Thomas Collins. The other, Samuel Reed. Her eyes widened. Outside, the man, Samuel Reed, stood tall even as the guards shoved him onto the steps. People in the lobby were whispering, recording on their phones. Richard Collins smirked, brushing off his suit. "Next time you want attention, old man," he sneered, "try a better story." Samuel met his gaze with quiet fire. "Truth doesn't need a story," he said softly. "It just needs time." Richard turned away, waving him off. But Mariah remained still, clutching the papers. Something deep inside told her that this wasn't madness. It was history resurfacing. As Samuel walked away, his sack now half empty, the sun caught the edges of the fallen papers still on the floor. The ink shimmered faintly, old, faded, but real. That night, the video hit social media. Homeless man claims he owns Collins Bank, gets thrown out. Within hours, it went viral. Some mocked him. Others were intrigued. But one frame caught the attention of a few sharp-eyed viewers. The brief glimpse of a signature beside Thomas Collins's name. Across the city, Samuel Reed watched from a small apartment. the faint blue light of the TV reflecting in his tired eyes. He didn't smile, but there was something in his expression. Calm, patient, inevitable. He whispered to himself, "Let them laugh tonight. They'll understand tomorrow." He reached into the corner and pulled out a weathered leather folder, packed tight with old contracts, letters, and blueprints. At the top, embossed in faded ink, were the words, "Collins and Reed Banking Co. Partnership Agreement." 85. Samuel set it gently on the table, exhaled, and looked out at the glowing skyline. The city that had forgotten him. "Tomorrow," he murmured. "The truth walks back through those doors." And in that quiet room, filled with the hum of traffic and the echo of memory, the story of the forgotten owner truly began. The following morning, the city buzzed with a single question. Who was Samuel Reed? Social media was ablaze with theories. Some said he was delusional. Others insisted the documents he carried looked authentic. News channels replayed the footage of him being thrown out of Collins National Bank, pausing on the moment his papers hit the floor. Inside the same bank, whispers floated through the marble halls like ghosts. Mariah Evans sat at her desk, unable to concentrate. The image of that old deed, the faded ink, the signatures, haunted her. Finally, she gave in to curiosity. She approached the branch manager's office, knocking lightly. "Come in," said Richard Collins, his tone already impatient. Mariah stepped inside, holding a file folder. "Sir, about the man from yesterday." Richard looked up sharply. "What about him?" "I think there's something you should see," she said, placing the copied documents she'd secretly made on his desk. "These signatures. They match your father's from the early archives. I checked." For a moment, Richard's face remained neutral. Then his lips twisted into a smirk. "You think some crazy old man waltzes in here, drops a few pieces of paper, and suddenly he owns the bank? Don't be naive, Mariah. But sir, that's enough." His tone hardened. "Forget this ever happened. If anyone asks, you don't remember a thing. Understood?" Mariah hesitated. Something in his eyes, not anger but fear, confirmed what she already suspected. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, then turned and left. Behind her, Richard snatched up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. "It's me," he said in a low voice. "We have a problem." "He's back." Across town, Samuel Reed sat in a small diner, sipping his coffee and watching the morning news. The screen above the counter replayed the viral video, his own face frozen mid-sentence as he declared the bank his. He couldn't help but chuckle bitterly. 35 years, he muttered, and they still think I'm crazy. A woman slid into the booth across from him, Grace Miller, an investigative journalist he'd contacted months earlier. Her trench coat was damp from the morning rain, her expression sharp and curious. "You were right," she said, setting down a folder. "I pulled the early incorporation records from the state archives. The original charter lists two founders, Thomas Collins and Samuel Reed. 5 years later, the name Reed disappears." Samuel nodded slowly. "And you found why?" Grace's eyes darkened. "A falsified contract, forged signatures, and a so-called mental health declaration used to discredit you. He set you up. He always was the clever one," Samuel said with a sad smile. "I built that bank with him, every brick, every idea. When we started, we were partners, friends. Trusted him." Grace leaned forward. "Why now? Why come back after all these years?" Samuel looked down at his calloused hands. "Because I finally have what I need. Every document he buried, every lie he told. I kept the originals locked away. And soon the world will see them." Grace exhaled. "You're planning to take him down publicly?" "No," Samuel said quietly. "I'm planning to take back what's mine." Later that afternoon, Richard Collins stood in the private office of his father, Thomas Collins, the now retired patriarch who once ruled Atlanta's financial scene. Thomas, older and frailer, but still commanding, listened as Richard recounted the incident. "I told you to handle this decades ago," Thomas said coldly. "You were supposed to make sure that man never resurfaced." "I thought he was gone," Richard muttered. Thomas leaned forward, his eyes sharp as glass. "Then make sure he stays gone. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." As Richard left, Thomas turned toward the window, gazing out at the skyline that bore his name. For the first time in years, he felt it, the chill of something long buried clawing its way back to the surface. That night, in his apartment, Samuel opened a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside were old photographs, sealed envelopes, and a small brass key, the key to a safety deposit box he had sealed 35 years earlier at the original Collins Bank. He ran his fingers over the key, remembering the day he hid the evidence that could destroy Thomas Collins forever. "They stole my name," he whispered to himself. "But not my proof." A soft knock echoed on the door. Samuel froze, heart pounding. When he opened it, no one was there, only an unmarked envelope on the floor. He bent to pick it up. Inside was a single piece of paper with 4 words written in neat, familiar handwriting. "You should have stayed buried." Samuel's breath caught. He looked out into the dark hallway, empty, silent, waiting, and in that moment he knew the past hadn't just returned. It was hunting him. Rain fell in steady sheets over Atlanta, drumming against glass and concrete like an unending heartbeat. The storm mirrored the tension brewing within Collins National Bank, where whispers of the homeless owner still lingered in the corners of conversation. But for Samuel Reed, the storm was a reminder that truth always comes after the rain. He sat by his apartment window, the mysterious note lying before him. "You should have stayed buried." The words burned into his mind. He turned them over and over, searching for clues. The handwriting, the paper texture, the faint smell of expensive ink. Whoever sent it had money and motive. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Grace, it's me. Meet me at the old bank archives in an hour. Bring your press ID. We'll need access." The archives of Collins National Bank were located in a forgotten part of downtown, a towering stone building from another century. The old logo, Collins and Reed Banking Co., still faintly shimmered under layers of dust. Grace met him at the gate, flashlight in hand, her expression tense. "I don't like this, Sam. Someone's watching you." That note wasn't random. Samuel managed a weary smile. "They can watch all they want. Tonight we find the proof." They entered the darkened halls, their footsteps echoing. Filing cabinets towered like silent sentinels, filled with decades of paper trails, lies, signatures, and deals that built the Collins empire. Grace began pulling drawers open, scanning old ledgers and incorporation files. "If what you said is true, then somewhere here, there must be an unbroken record of your partnership." Samuel nodded, running his fingers along the shelves until he found a small brass lockbox marked Founders, Private. He knelt, brushing away the dust, and noticed something strange. The same initials engraved on the corner. SR. His heartbeat quickened. "Grace, this is it." But before he could open it, footsteps echoed from the far end of the hall. They froze. Grace whispered, "Did you hear that?" The sound came again, slow, deliberate, moving closer. The flashlight flickered as a shadow stretched across the far wall. Samuel stepped forward, gripping the lockbox. "Who's there?" No answer. Only silence. Then the faint creak of the door closing behind them. Grace turned, panic rising. "Sam, the door, it's locked." A metallic click echoed through the corridor. The light snapped off. For a few tense seconds, there was nothing but darkness and the sound of rain outside. Then a low, distorted voice filled the room, coming from somewhere in the archives. "You should have stayed away, Samuel." Grace's eyes darted around. "It's him." "Someone's here." Samuel's voice stayed calm. "Keep the light steady. They want to scare us, not kill us. Not yet." He scanned the room, looking for the source of the voice. It came from an old intercom speaker embedded in the wall, the kind used decades ago to connect different vault rooms. He approached it slowly, speaking into it. "Thomas, I know it's you. You took everything and you think you can bury me again. But I've got your confession on paper, and soon the world will see it." The voice came back colder this time. "You built your grave with those papers, Sam. Keep digging and I'll help you finish it." The intercom crackled and went dead. Grace grabbed his arm. "We need to get out of here now." Samuel looked down at the lockbox in his hands, his name carved deep into the brass. He could feel the truth pulsing inside it like a heartbeat. "Not yet," he said. "I didn't come this far to leave empty-handed." Minutes later, after forcing the door open with a metal bar, they escaped into the rain-soaked night, the box clutched tightly between them. Grace's car screeched onto the street, water splashing up as they sped away from the archives. Inside the car, she glanced at him. "You think Collins sent someone?" "He doesn't have to," Samuel said, his eyes fixed on the box. "Men like him build ghosts to do their work. Someone's cleaning up his past." Grace looked down at the box, trembling slightly. "What's inside?" Samuel took a deep breath. "If I'm right, the real bank charter, proof of ownership, and a record of the payout that erased my name." He turned the key slowly. The lock clicked open. Inside lay neatly folded papers, brittle with age, and a small cassette tape labeled Founders Meeting 1986. Grace's eyes widened. "You think that's the original recording?" Samuel nodded, a grim smile forming. "That tape is the ghost of the past, and tomorrow it's going to haunt the Collins family." Across town, in the penthouse office of Thomas Collins, the old man stood before his window as thunder rolled across the city. His phone buzzed. Distorted voice on the other end said, "He has the box." Thomas closed his eyes. "Then we end this tonight." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating his reflection, a Manonce worshipped as a builder, now consumed by fear of the truth, because in the vaults of his own empire, the ghosts he'd buried were waking. Morning light crept through the blinds of Grace's apartment, cutting through the haze of cigarette smoke and sleepless tension. Empty coffee cups littered the table. Between them sat the lockbox, now open, the decades-old documents spread out like pieces of a long-buried crime scene. Samuel sat hunched forward, staring at the cassette tape in silence. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned it over. Founders Meeting, 1986. "This little tape," Grace murmured, "could destroy one of the most powerful men in the country." Samuel gave a tired smile. "It could also destroy me, Grace. Collins will make sure of that." She met his eyes. "Then we get it out before he can stop us. I've got an old tape player in the newsroom archives. It's an analog just like this." He nodded slowly. "Let's hear what 35 years of silence sounds like." The Tribune archives were quiet that morning, the hum of servers mixing with the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. Grace led Samuel down the narrow hallway to a small editing room, walls lined with old audio reels and forgotten stories. She plugged in the player, inserted the tape and pressed play. At first, only static. Then faint voices emerged, muffled, old, but unmistakably real. "Thomas Collins, the acquisition's complete. Once we transfer Reed's shares to the Dummy Corporation, we'll bury the trail under legal restructuring." Unknown voice. "And Reed?" "Thomas Collins, leave him the debt. By the time he realizes what happened, he'll be bankrupt, and no one will believe a man who's lost everything." Grace froze. The voice was clear, confident, cruel. Samuel closed his eyes. Every word was a blade reopening an old wound. The recording continued, Thomas laughing, another voice mentioning signatures and fake ledgers. Then came something that made Grace sit upright. Thomas Collins. "If the regulators ever ask, we'll say the records burned in the 1987 vault fire." Grace looked at Samuel. "That's it. That's the proof," he confessed. But Samuel didn't answer. He was staring at the end of the tape where a faint whisper overlapped the sound. Another voice, weaker, desperate. "Samuel Reed, you can't take what's mine, Thomas. I'll make sure everyone knows." And then a scuffle, a shout, and silence. Grace hit pause, heart racing. "That's you," Samuel nodded. "That's the night it all ended." Before they could speak again, the lights flickered. Then total darkness. Grace turned, panic flaring. "Power cut?" A voice came from the doorway, cold and calm. "Not quite." Two men stepped in, both wearing suits, earpieces glinting. One held a gun low against his thigh. "Mr. Reed," the taller man said. "Mr. Collins requests his property back." Grace moved in front of the table instinctively. "You can't take this. It's evidence." The man smirked. "Miss, if I were you, I'd stay out of matters that end in obituaries." Samuel rose slowly, hands slightly raised. "Tell Thomas this tape is already backed up. If I disappear, it goes public." The man hesitated, just long enough for Grace to act. She grabbed the player's power cord and swung it hard against the table, snapping it in half. The gunman flinched as sparks flew. Samuel grabbed the tape, bolted for the side door, and Grand Ace right behind him. The men shouted, giving chase. They ran through the back stairwell, the echo of boots behind them. Samuel's lungs burned, but adrenaline pushed him onward. They burst through a maintenance exit and into the rain-soaked alley outside. Grace stumbled, but kept running. Where now? My old friend still works at the courthouse, Samuel panted. If we can reach him, we can file this as part of a reopened investigation. A black car screeched into the alley, the same one that had followed them before. Too late, Grace gasped. The gunman stepped out again. One aimed his pistol. Before he could fire, a city bus roared past, its headlights blinding them for a split second. Samuel grabbed Grace's arm and ducked behind a dumpster. The bus blocked the line of sight just long enough. They sprinted through the side street and disappeared into the crowd at the main intersection. Hours later, soaked and shaking, they arrived at the courthouse basement. A single lamp flickered over an old clerk's desk. The man behind it, Robert Hayes, Samuel's friend from years ago, looked up in shock. Sam? My God, I thought you were dead. Almost, Samuel said, pulling the tape from his jacket. I need this logged as evidence, under sealed custody. If anything happens to me, it must go to the federal investigators. Hayes nodded grimly, taking the tape. You're putting your life on the line again, Sam. Samuel smiled faintly. This time it's worth it. Outside, as they stepped into the night, Grace looked at him. You think we're safe now? Samuel shook his head. Safe? No. But for the first time, Collins isn't. High above the city in his glass tower, Thomas Collins watched a live feed of the courthouse. His jaw clenched. Destroy the backups, he ordered. And bring me Reed. Alive. Thunder cracked across the skyline. The game had changed, and both men knew only one would walk away. The streets of downtown Atlanta pulsed with the glow of neon lights and restless traffic. But for Samuel Reed and Grace Miller, every sound was a threat. They moved quickly, weaving through alleys and side streets, trying to disappear in a city that never slept. Behind them, unseen but close, Thomas Collins's men hunted, quiet, coordinated, and ruthless. Grace clutched her jacket tighter against the cold wind. You think they'll go this far just for one tape? Samuel's voice was low. That tape could end Thomas Collins' empire. He'll do anything to bury it, and me with it. They turned down a narrow alley where rain pooled in dark puddles. A trash can clattered nearby. Grace froze. Samuel pulled her behind a dumpster. Two men passed the mouth of the alley, their earpieces glinting under the streetlights. Move, Samuel whispered. We head toward the train yard. They won't follow us into the industrial zone. Why there? She asked. Because that's where it all began, he said, eyes cold with memory. Meanwhile, on the top floor of Collins' financial tower, Thomas Collins stood before a wall of screens showing security feeds from across the city. His expression was unreadable, calm yet dangerous. Reed's alive, and he has the tape, said Agent Miles, his private fixer. Collins turned slowly. Then why are you standing here? Miles hesitated. He has media contacts. If we push too hard, it could go public. Collins' eyes narrowed. Then make it look like an accident. I want the tape destroyed. And Reed silenced permanently. At the train yard, Samuel and Grace found shelter in an abandoned cargo shed. Rusted tools hung on the walls, and the air smelled of oil and decay. Samuel rummaged through his satchel, pulling out copies of the documents, deeds, signatures, and a list of false transfers proving Collins's theft. Grace watched him, shivering. You kept all of this, all these years? I had to, he said. When Collins stole the bank from me, I lost everything. My home, my name, my family. But I never lost the truth. Grace's gaze softened. And now you're risking your life for it. He met her eyes. Some debts need to be paid, no matter the cost. A faint noise made him pause. Footsteps on gravel outside. Grace whispered. They found us. The shed door burst open. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Samuel grabbed Grace's hand and bolted through the side window, glass shattering as they hit the wet ground. Bullets cracked behind them, hitting metal and sparks flying off train cars. They sprinted between rows of freight containers, their shadows darting under the flashing lights of the patrol cars nearby. Grace stumbled, scraping her knee, but Samuel pulled her up. Come on! A figure appeared in front of them, one of Collins' men. Samuel swung a rusted metal pipe, hitting the man across the arm. The gun clattered to the ground. Grace kicked it away as they kept running. They reached a fence topped with barbed wire. Behind it, the faint light of the subway entrance glowed. Freedom, if they could reach it. Samuel boosted Grace over the fence, then climbed after her. A shot rang out. The bullet grazed his shoulder, tearing through his coat. "Sam!" Grace screamed, pulling him over. They tumbled onto the other side, both gasping. He pressed his hand against the wound. "Just a scratch. Keep moving." Minutes later, they slipped into the underground tunnels, the roar of passing trains echoing off the walls. Grace helped Samuel sit, his breathing heavy. "We can't keep running," she said. "He's too powerful. We need to strike back." Samuel nodded weakly. "That's what we'll do." "I didn't make just one copy of the tape." Grace blinked. "You mean?" He smiled faintly. "There's a second recording, hidden. One that Thomas doesn't know about." Grace's eyes widened. "Where is it?" "In the safety deposit box," he said, voice fading. "Under another name. The same trick he used on me." Before she could respond, the tunnel lights flickered. Far down the tracks, a silhouette appeared. Tall, composed, and chillingly familiar. "Agent Miles." He held a flashlight and called out, "Samuel, you can't hide forever. Give me the tape and maybe I'll let the girl live." Grace whispered, terrified. "What do we do?" Samuel's expression hardened. "We make him chase the wrong ghost." He slipped the tape into Grace's hand. "Take this to Channel 9 News. Ask for a reporter named Anderson. Tell him Samuel Reed sent you." "What about you?" she asked. Samuel stood, wincing from pain. "I'll hold them off." "No, Sam," he cut her off. "Go. That's an order." With tears in her eyes, Grace ran into the dark tunnel, clutching the tape like a lifeline. Samuel turned to face Miles, stepping into the beam of the flashlight. "You think you can erase me again?" he said quietly. Miles smirked. "Not erase, just finish what your past started." Samuel's gaze steeled. "Then let's finish it." Gunfire echoed through the tunnel. Grace didn't look back. The tape in her hand, the truth, was now the only thing that could save them both. And somewhere deep in the shadows, Samuel Reed made a stand that would either make him a legend or bury him forever. The first rays of dawn painted the Atlanta skyline gold, but for Grace Miller, there was no beauty in the sunrise, only the echo of gunfire still ringing in her ears. She stumbled through the early morning streets, clutching her jacket to hide the cassette tape pressed tightly against her chest. Every sound made her flinch. The rumble of passing buses, the chatter of commuters, the shrill wail of sirens, all reminders that Samuel Reed might be gone. Her breath came in sharp gasps as she reached the Channel 9 News building, a towering structure of glass and steel. She pushed through the doors, drenched in rain and fear. The security guard frowned. "Miss, can I help?" "I need to see Evan Anderson," she interrupted. Tell him Samuel Reed sent me." The guard hesitated, clearly uncertain, but something in her eyes, the desperation, the exhaustion, convinced him to make the call. Minutes later, a tall man in a gray suit appeared from the elevator. His sharp blue eyes studied her with curiosity. "Grace Miller?" he asked. She nodded, trembling. "You're Anderson?" "Yes, let's talk somewhere private." Inside the editing room, Grace placed the cassette tape on the table as though handling a live explosive. "This," she said, voice shaking, "is proof that Thomas Collins stole everything from Samuel Reed. There's a recording, his voice, his confession, everything." Anderson leaned forward, brows furrowed. "You're saying Collins, the CEO of Holston Bank, committed fraud?" Grace nodded. "Worse, he ruined Reed's life. He took his bank, his legacy, and his name, and when Reed tried to fight back, they erased him." Anderson inserted the tape into a player and hit play. The faint hiss filled the room, followed by the familiar voices. Collins' arrogant tone, the talk of forged documents, of burning ledgers. Grace closed her eyes as the words filled the room again. Anderson sat frozen, disbelief turning into grim realization. This is a career-ending confession. No, it's a life-ending one. If this goes public, Collins is finished. But then something unexpected happened. As the tape neared its end, a new voice emerged, faint, emotional, and older. "Samuel Reed. If you're hearing this, then I failed to stop him. But there's more. Collins didn't just steal from me. He stole from my blood." Grace frowned. "Wait, what?" Samuel Reed. His son, Michael Collins, isn't his. He's mine. He took everything, even my family. The tape clicked off. Silence filled the room. Anderson's jaw dropped. You're telling me Collins raised Reed's son as his own? Grace's hands trembled. It sounds insane, but if that's true, it changes everything. This isn't just about money or fraud anymore. It's about identity. Revenge. Before they could process it further, the lights flickered. A piercing alarm blared through the building. Anderson cursed under his breath. He found us. Who? Collins. His people must have traced you here. Grace's heart pounded. Through the window, she saw 2 black SUVs pull up outside the station. Men in suits poured out, moving fast. Anderson grabbed the tape and slipped it into a padded envelope. Take this. There's a backup drive in my office on the 10th floor. I'll hold them off while you copy the file. But you'll be killed. Grace protested. He gave her a tight smile. Maybe, but the story won't die with me. Grace sprinted up the stairwell as gunshots cracked below. She burst into the 10th floor newsroom, panting, and dashed toward Anderson's computer. She inserted the tape, uploading the audio file into the cloud. The progress bar moved painfully slow. 20%, 40%, 60%. The elevator dinged. Grace ducked behind a desk as 2 men stepped out. She's here, one muttered. Grace's pulse thundered. The bar reached 98%. She held her breath, then upload complete. She grabbed the USB drive, slipped it into her boot, and fled through the emergency exit just as the men fired. Outside, the rain came down harder, soaking her hair and clothes. She didn't stop running until she reached the edge of Centennial Park. There, she crouched behind a monument, shaking uncontrollably. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. If you want Reed alive, bring the tape to me, tonight. Holston Tower. 11 p.m. She stared at the screen, disbelief and fear washing over her. Samuel was alive. Collins had him. Her tears mixed with the rain as she whispered to herself, Then I'm coming for you, Thomas. The top floor of Holston Tower. Thomas Collins watched the same message being sent. He stood before the window, city lights reflecting off his cold eyes. Beside him, a bruised and bloodied Samuel Reed sat in a chair, tied but defiant. You really think she'll come? Collins asked. Samuel looked up, his lip bleeding but his voice steady. You don't know Grace. She's smarter than you think. Collins smirked. Good, let her come. I've waited 30 years to end this, face to face. The storm outside raged louder. The stage was set for the final confrontation, one that would decide not just the fate of a man, but the legacy of truth itself. The storm hit Atlanta like vengeance from the heavens. Rain slashed across the glass towers, thunder growled over the skyline, and lightning lit up the city in white bursts of fury. At the heart of it all stood Holston Tower, a monument to greed, lies, and betrayal. Grace Miller stood across the street, soaked to the bone, her hair clinging to her face. In her hand was a small flash drive, the last copy of the recording that could destroy Thomas Collins and free Samuel Reed. She took a deep breath. You took everything from him, she whispered to herself. Now I'll take everything from you. Pulling up her hood, she crossed the empty street and entered the building. Inside, Holston Tower was unnervingly silent. The lobby, usually full of bankers and clients, was deserted. The marble floors gleamed under flickering fluorescent lights. Grace's footsteps echoed like gunshots. From the security desk, a voice came through the intercom. Ms. Miller, I was wondering when you'd arrive. She froze. Collins's voice was calm, smooth, and cold. Come to the top floor, he said. Let's end this properly. The elevator doors opened on their own. She stepped inside, the air thick with dread. As the elevator rose, she saw her reflection in the mirrored walls. Tired, frightened, but unbroken, ding floor 42. The doors opened to Collins' office, vast and dimly lit, with rain beating against the panoramic windows. At the center of the room sat Samuel Reed, bruised, tied to a chair, but alive. His eyes widened when he saw her. Grace, don't. Thomas Collins stood beside him, holding a pistol loosely in one hand, an almost amused smile on his face. He was older now, silver-haired, but his presence was still commanding. the kind of man used to controlling every room he entered. "Well," Collins said softly, "the reporter and the ghost. What a reunion." Grace kept her chin high. "You're not getting the tape," Collins chuckled. "Oh, my dear, I already have it. What you hold in your hand, that's a copy, isn't it? You're a clever girl. But clever doesn't win wars. Power does." He turned his gaze to Samuel. "You should have stayed buried, old friend." Samuel coughed, blood on his lips. "And you should have stayed honest." Collins's smile faltered. "Honesty doesn't build empires. I built this tower from ashes. I turned your failed dream into a kingdom." "You turned it into a lie," Samuel said. Grace stepped closer. "And tonight everyone's going to know it." She raised the flash drive. "This contains the full recording. Confessions, forged documents, everything. By now the upload has already gone live." Collins' eyes darkened. "You're bluffing." "Try me," she said. Before anyone could move, the elevator behind her dinged open, and 2 armed guards rushed out. Grace darted behind a desk as bullets shattered the glass walls. Samuel shouted her name. Collins barked orders, furious now, his calm facade cracking. Grace crawled across the marble floor, clutching the flash drive. One of the guards grabbed her arm. She swung a broken shard of glass into his leg. He howled and fell. Samuel, despite his restraints, kicked the other guard off balance. Collins aimed his gun. "Enough!" The room froze. Rain pounded harder against the windows. He turned to Grace, breathing hard. "You think truth matters? You think anyone will believe a dead journalist and a forgotten man?" Grace met his gaze, defiant. "Truth doesn't die just because you want it to." With a scream of rage, Collins fired, but Samuel lunged sideways, knocking the chair into him. The bullet hit the floor, sparks flying. Grace rolled behind the desk, grabbed the fallen gun from the guard, and aimed. "Drop it," she shouted. Collins laughed, insane now. "You won't shoot me." But Grace's hands were steady. "No," she said. "But the world will." She hit the button on her phone, "Go live." Behind her, the computer screen flickered to life, broadcasting the security feed from Collins' office directly to Channel 9 News. The camera caught everything. The gun, the confession, the chaos. Collins realized it was too late. His arrogance drained into panic. "What have you done?" Grace stepped forward. "Exposed you." The elevator doors burst open again, this time the police. Sirens wailed from below. Collins's guards dropped their weapons, surrendering. Thomas backed toward the window, eyes wild. "You think they'll arrest me? I built this city." Samuel struggled to stand, bloodied but resolute. "Then you'll fall with it." Collins looked at him one last time. "You always wanted justice, Sam. Here's yours." He raised the gun to his own head. Grace screamed, but before he could pull the trigger, a police sniper's shot shattered the window. Collins staggered backwards, eyes wide, then fell through the glass into the storm below. The tower trembled as wind howled through the broken window. Silence followed, heavy, final. Later that morning, the footage aired nationwide. "Banking empire exposed. Thomas Collins's fraud revealed," blazed across every headline. Investigations reopened. Victims came forward, and Holston Bank's shares collapsed overnight. Grace stood outside the courthouse, microphone in hand, her voice steady despite everything. "Justice delayed is never justice denied," she said. "Today, the truth finally speaks." In the background, Samuel Reed stepped out of the courthouse, free at last. The world now knew his name again, not as a beggar or madman, but as the rightful founder of the institution that once betrayed him. Grace approached him, smiling through tears. "It's over," she whispered. Samuel shook his head softly. "No, Grace, it's just beginning." He looked up at the sky where the storm had finally cleared, sunlight breaking through the clouds. "People like Collins," he said, "build towers to touch the sky. But they forget. Every lie they stack brings them closer to the fall." Grace smiled faintly. "And the truth?" He turned to her, eyes bright with quiet strength. "The truth always rises." Final ending words. As the city buzzed with headlines and justice echoed through the streets, one story stood taller than any tower. The story of a man who lost everything to corruption, yet reclaimed his name with truth. Samuel Reed didn't just win back a bank. He won back his dignity, his legacy, and the faith that even after decades of silence, truth still speaks louder than power.